The first thing you notice about the borderlands is how quiet they are after sunset. Even the wind knows better than to linger. I used to fear that silence. Now it's how I breathe. Our home sits at the edge of the woods, a crooked little cottage where the roof leaks when it rains, and the hearth never quite stays lit. It isn't much, but it's safe. And safety, for me, has always been borrowed, never owned. The villagers call me Leora the Healer. They come when their children fall sick, when their crops rot, when the fever takes their elders. They pay me in bread, herbs, or silence, whichever they can afford. None of them ask where I learned the craft, or why my eyes glow faintly silver when I work. In the borderlands, you don't survive by asking questions. Still, sometimes I catch the whispers. She lives alone. She doesn't bow on moon nights. She's not one of us. They aren't wrong. I was born under the royal moon, raised among wolves who believed loyalty was measured by obedience. When I refused to obey, I was exiled. The High Alpha called it mercy. I've learned since that mercy from tyrants is just another form of punishment. Now, I live for one thing, Eden. My daughter is 6, maybe 7. I've stopped counting the years because counting reminds me of what I lost. She has my hair, a wild storm of brown curls, and her father's eyes, gold as the midsummer sun, eyes that see too much. She's outside when the night comes, chasing fireflies through the fog, her laughter a sound I never get used to. Every time I hear it, I wonder how something so pure came from a world so cruel. "Mama," she says when she bursts back through the door, cheeks flushed, hair tangled. "The others are howling. Can we go too?" I smile. "Not tonight, little one." Her smile fades. "But you never howl." I set down the bowl of crushed herbs and look at her. She's standing in the doorway, moonlight spilling over her face, small and fierce in a way only children can be. "Why, Mama?" she asks again. "Don't you hear it calling?" The truth is I do. I hear it every night. The pull of the pack, the whisper of the bond that once tied me to a kingdom of wolves. I hear the ache of it like a ghost scratching at my bones. But I also hear something else. The echo of fire, the screams, the night I lost everything. So I kneel before her and brush a leaf from her hair. Because some songs, I say softly, aren't meant to be heard, only remembered. She tilts her head, trying to understand, then nods in the solemn way children do when they sense a truth too heavy for their age. "Do you remember, Mama?" I swallow. Every note. After she's asleep, I step outside. The forest glows silver, alive with the distant howls of wolves under the full moon. Once, I would have joined them, voice raised, head thrown back, my heart bound to theirs in wild devotion. Now I stand apart, barefoot in the dew, listening like an exile at the door of heaven. I wonder if Thorn, the Alpha King, still howls too. It's been 7 years since I saw his face, 7 years since he raised his sword and chose the council's decree over me. I remember the look in his eyes, the same conflict I once mistook for mercy. He never knew I was carrying his child. When the moon shifts behind a cloud, I whisper a silent prayer that it will never reveal us. That Eden will never have to learn what it means to be born of both healer and king, love and betrayal. But fate doesn't listen to those who whisper. It listens to those who cry out. And one day, it will hear her. From inside the cottage, Eden stirs in her sleep. I hear her murmur through the half-closed door, dreaming, "Don't take my mother away." The words slice through me. I move to her bedside, brushing the hair from her forehead, and for a long time, I just sit there, watching the rise and fall of her breath, the pulse of life beneath her skin. My hands, so used to mending others, tremble at the thought of not being able to save my own child from the world that once devoured me. Outside, the wolves fall silent. The night grows still again. In the distance, thunder rumbles, Not from the sky, but from the mountains. A storm is moving through the realm, carried by hoofbeats and law and the scent of iron. The king's patrols have reached the borderlands, and though I don't yet know it, by the time the next moon rises, the child's cry, "Please don't take my mother away," will echo through the woods, across the villages, and all the way to the throne itself, until even the Alpha King, who thought he had forgotten my name, will stop and listen. The dawn came red that morning, not gentle, not golden, but the color of warning. I had been awake before the sun, kneeling by the river behind our cottage. The night's rain had flooded the bank, carrying with it the scent of iron. It wasn't until I saw the tracks pressed deep into the mud, paw prints too large to belong to any common wolf, that I knew what was coming. The royal pack was near. Still, I tried to ignore it. Pretend, as I had for years, that the crown had forgotten I existed. Pretend the borderlands were enough distance to keep a secret life hidden. I was wrong. The first sound came like thunder, the crack of hooves on frozen soil, the low growl of armored wolves. Then came the banners, fluttering black and gold through the mist. The mark of the High Alpha burned into the cloth like a curse. Eden ran to the window. "Mama, riders!" she cried, voice trembling with excitement instead of fear. She was too young to know the difference. "Stay inside," I said quickly, my hands already moving, gathering herbs, hiding the talismans I should never have kept. My pulse hammered, my instincts waking beneath my skin. My wolf stirred, restless, half-starved, aching for escape. But there was nowhere to run. The knock came sharp and merciless, not a request, a declaration. "Leora of the border village," a voice boomed. "By command of the Alpha King, open your door." Eden froze beside me. I could smell her fear. Faint and sweet, like rain on firewood. I wanted to tell her not to be afraid, but fear is what keeps you alive. So instead, I whispered, "Hide." She shook her head, clutching my skirt. "I don't want to." I knelt, gripping her shoulders. "Please, my love. Just this once. Do what I ask. Behind the chest, like we practiced." She obeyed then, though her eyes were wide with questions I didn't have time to answer. When I opened the door, the morning light spilled in like judgment. There were 6 of them, soldiers of the royal guard, each cloaked in furs and iron. Their armor bore the crescent of the crown, their eyes the coldness of men who'd long forgotten mercy. The one in front, tall, scarred, too proud for his rank, held a parchment in his hand. "We're searching for a fugitive," he said, "a traitor accused of forbidden magic. The king's law demands she be brought to trial." I forced a calm I did not feel. "Then you've wasted your ride. There are no traitors here." He smirked, glancing past me. "Strange. The villagers said they saw light last night. Healing light. Wolf magic." My heart stilled. Healing wasn't forbidden, not truly, but the way I healed, with my hands, with the ancient language, that was. It belonged to the bloodline the crown had erased, the bloodline of Alaris, my bloodline. He stepped past me without permission, pushing open the back door. "We'll see about that." I followed him into the clearing behind the house, and froze. The wolf I had tended before dawn still lay there, half in shadow. Its flank rose and fell in shallow breaths, the wound I'd mended glowing faintly where my hands had touched it. The soldiers saw it too. The glow pulsed once, then faded, but not fast enough. One of them cursed under his breath. "By the moon! It's her!" The leader turned to me, eyes narrowing. "So it's true. You heal with the old tongue." I said nothing. Words would only sharpen the blade already at my throat. "Seize her," he ordered. I didn't move. Behind me, I heard Eden's small gasp. She had crept from her hiding place, unable to watch in silence. "Mama!" she cried, and the soldiers turned at the sound. I stepped in front of her, instinct rising like a storm. My wolf surged beneath my skin, clawing to protect her, to tear through every man who dared come close, but I swallowed it down. If I shifted, if they saw what I truly was, neither of us would survive. I lifted my hands slowly, palms open. "I'll come," I said quietly. "Just don't touch her." The leader hesitated, perhaps surprised by how easily I surrendered. He didn't understand that strength sometimes looks like stillness. As they bound my wrists, I met his gaze. He thought he saw compliance. What he didn't see, what he couldn't see, was the faint shimmer in my eyes. The old power had woken. It moved like light behind my irises, silver and soft, ancient as the first moon. The same mark the royal blood once carried, the one the High Alpha had sworn to destroy generations ago. The soldier's confidence faltered for a breath. "What are you?" he whispered. I smiled faintly, though my throat ached with the weight of it. "The mistake your king keeps trying to forget." Eden's fingers clutched the edge of my skirt, trembling. I looked down at her, my small, stubborn miracle, and forced my voice steady. "It's all right, little one." She shook her head, tears glistening. "Please don't go." My heart broke in that moment, not from fear, but from knowing that history had found me again, and this time, it had seen my child. As they dragged me toward the waiting horses, the wounded wolf behind us lifted its head and howled. The soldiers flinched. The villagers who had gathered at the edge of the clearing crossed themselves, and above us, the rising sun caught the silver in my eyes, turning them bright enough for the world to finally remember what it had tried to erase. The blood of the alphas still lived, and it had never stopped watching. The forest was still waking when they took me. The soldiers marched in silence, their breath rising in pale clouds, their boots striking the frozen path with the rhythm of judgment. Chains bit into my wrists. I didn't fight them. I'd learned long ago that resistance only gave men permission to be cruel. The trees closed around us, dark and familiar. The same woods where I'd once gathered herbs with Eden, where she'd laughed as butterflies landed on her palms. Now, every shadow looked like a ghost of that laughter slipping between the branches as I passed. They didn't let me look back at the cottage. That was mercy, I suppose. Seeing it vanish into the mist would have broken something I couldn't mend. I told myself she was safe, that she was hiding the way I'd taught her, that the soldiers hadn't seen her, that she'd wait until the sun rose high, and then she'd run to old Mira's house by the well, the only neighbor I trusted. But even as I told myself those lies, my wolf whispered the truth. Eden was too much her mother's child. She would never hide while I was taken. The leader of the guard, a man named Garin, rode ahead on horseback, glancing back only once. "The king will decide what's to be done with you," he said. His tone was calm, but his hand tightened on the reins. "If I were you, healer, I'd pray he shows mercy." "I stopped praying years ago," I said. He frowned but didn't answer. The sky was pale with morning when we reached the ridge, the same place where the borderlands ended and the royal roads began. Once we crossed, there'd be no turning back, no village, no witnesses, no escape. That's when I heard it. A sound so small it could have been mistaken for a bird's cry. But my blood knew it before my mind did. "Eden," I whispered. The soldiers heard it too, a voice rising faintly behind us, carried by the wind. "Wait," one muttered. "Did you hear?" And then it came again, louder this time, trembling, desperate, pure. "Please, please don't take my mother away." The forest stopped breathing. The soldiers froze mid-step as if the world itself had turned to listen. The horses shifted uneasily, ears flicking back. Even the wind faltered, caught in that single cry. I turned, chains rattling, and saw her. My little girl running through the trees, barefoot, hair streaming behind her like wildfire. "Eden, no!" I cried, but the words tore my throat raw. She stumbled once, caught herself, kept running. Her cheeks were streaked with tears, but her eyes, those golden eyes, blazed like the dawn. The soldiers moved to intercept her, but before they could, the wolves arrived. They had followed us from the edge of the packlands, drawn by the scent of power and blood. Dozens of them, their fur bristling in the half-light. For a heartbeat, I thought they would tear her apart. But when she cried again, "Please don't take her," every wolf in the clearing went still. Then, one by one, they lowered their heads. Even the alpha's hound, massive and battle-scarred, whimpered softly and sank to its knees. The soldiers backed away, muttering prayers. "What is this?" one breathed. "What kind of witchcraft?" But I knew it wasn't witchcraft. It was legacy. She had her father's blood, the blood of kings, and my voice. And together, in that one plea, the world remembered who we were. Garen dismounted, staring as if he'd seen a ghost. "The child's voice," he murmured. "It carries the mark." Eden reached me then, throwing her arms around my legs. "Please don't let them hurt you," she sobbed into my skirt. I knelt despite the chains, holding her close, breathing her in, earth, smoke, rain. My heart was breaking and mending all at once. "It's all right," I whispered against her hair. "You've done enough, little one." But even as I said it, something else stirred in the air. A pulse, a shift. Far to the north, miles away in the capital, a beast woke. I felt it as surely as the wind on my face. The sudden snap of power, the echo of a bond long severed. My mark burned faintly beneath my skin, as if answering a call I'd tried to forget. And in the distant halls of stone and gold, the Alpha King rose from his throne. Thorn. The name I hadn't spoken in years. They said his wolf had gone silent, that he hadn't shifted since the night he lost his mate and cursed the world. But when Eden's voice reached him, carried on the wind and through the bloodline we shared, something ancient inside him broke free. Later, they would tell stories of how the king stood in the great hall, his eyes turning gold again, his wolf howling for the first time in 7 years. But in that moment, I didn't know any of it. I only knew the forest had gone silent, the soldiers too afraid to move, and my daughter clinging to me, as though the world would shatter if she let go. I looked up at the rising sun, my heart heavy with a truth I could no longer deny. The past had found me, and the king who once condemned me had heard the cry of his child, and was coming. The moon was high when the messenger came. I'd been awake long before the knock. Sleep no longer visited me easily. For 7 years, I'd ruled by the light of discipline alone. Order had replaced warmth, law had replaced faith. And mercy. Mercy was a word I'd buried beside the woman who once spoke it. The fire in the war room had burned low. Maps littered the table before me. Borders, fortresses, trade routes. The fragile scaffolding of peace that only fear could maintain. Fear of me. When the door opened, I didn't look up. "If this is another petition from the Southern Lords," I said, "tell them the answer is the same." "It isn't, my king." The voice wavered, not from disobedience but dread. I turned then and saw Garen's second-in-command standing in the doorway, his armor flecked with mud and frost. His eyes wouldn't meet mine. "Speak." He swallowed. "The patrol from the borderlands returned, sire. They found her." The word "her" hung between us, heavy and uncertain. "Who?" He hesitated. A mistake. My wolf stirred, restless beneath my skin. "Who?" I repeated, quieter this time. "A woman," he said quickly. "A healer accused of using the old ways. The soldiers claim she bears the mark of Alaris." The room went still. Even the fire seemed to bow to the silence. The mark of Alaris. For a long moment, I said nothing. I stared down at the table, at the ink-stained maps I'd spent half a life perfecting. Every border, every rule, every decree meant to keep the wildness at bay. The blood of Alaris was supposed to be gone. We had made sure of that. I remembered the night of the purge, the screams, the smoke, the scent of burned herbs in the air. I had been a boy, hiding behind a pillar while the High Alpha declared the healer's bloodline cursed. My mother had stood among them, pleading for mercy. "Their magic heals," she'd said. "It does not corrupt." The council called it treason. I could still see her face as they dragged her to the pyre, calm, proud, unbroken, even as the flames took her. I had looked away only once, when she screamed my name. That was the night I learned what mercy costs. Since then, I'd ruled without it. I'd built my throne on silence and obedience, not faith or forgiveness. I'd told myself that was how a kingdom survived. But now, this, the mark of Alaris. My mother's last words echoed in my skull like a curse. "Their line will return when the moon remembers." I stood abruptly, the chair scraping across the stone. The soldier flinched. "Where is she?" I asked. "Being held in the northern fortress, sire. Garen's men have already begun the questioning." "Questioning?" I snarled. "Do they know what that mark means?" He hesitated. "They think she's a witch." My hands clenched. The wolf within me, the one I'd starved for years, rose like a tide. My vision blurred at the edges, gold bleeding through. "Prepare my horse," I said. The soldier blinked. "Now?" "But the roads." "Now." He bowed and fled, the door slamming shut behind him. For a moment, I was alone again, alone with the ghosts. I crossed to the window, staring out at the city sprawled below. The moon hung low and swollen, silver light spilling across rooftops and towers. Once, I'd loved that sight. Now I could barely stand it. The moon saw everything. The lies, the betrayals, the blood I'd spilled to build a peace that would never last. And beneath it, somewhere beyond those mountains, a woman with a forgotten name sat in chains, accused of the same sin that had killed my mother. I pressed a hand to the cold glass. My reflection stared back. A man carved from duty, not mercy. A king who'd learned to fear the very thing that made him wolf. But fear does not stop the tide. By the time I reached the stables, the night had turned colder. My steed, black as pitch, pawed the ground as if it, too, could feel the pull of something old stirring in the dark. My beta appeared at the gate, startled. "Sire, it's dangerous to ride alone." "The patrols." "I'm not asking for company," I said. "Tell the council nothing until I return." He hesitated. "May I ask why, my king?" I paused, gripping the reins. The answer came without thought. "Because I need to see her with my own eyes." The gates opened. The road ahead stretched like a ribbon of shadow through the pines. The wind howled against my face, carrying with it the faintest scent of something I couldn't name. Wild, sharp, and familiar. And somewhere in that scent was memory. Not of war, but of her. I didn't know who she was yet, this healer with the forbidden blood, but I could feel it. The same way I had once felt my mother's last heartbeat from miles away. The same way I felt the moon's pull in my bones, no matter how hard I tried to deny it. When the first howl rose in the distance, I let it answer me. For 7 years, my wolf had been silent, but tonight, as I rode toward the woman who carried the mark of a past I'd tried to erase, the silence broke. And the Alpha King howled again. They dragged me through the gates of the northern fortress at dawn. The air was sharp with frost, the kind that burns when you breathe. Chains bound my wrists, silver biting into skin until I could smell the faint sweetness of my own blood. Around me, soldiers kept their distance, not out of respect, but superstition. They'd seen the glow in my eyes when they caught me. Wolves fear what they don't understand. and they understand very little of mercy. Inside, the fortress smelled of iron and ash, the kind of place where truth came to die beneath the weight of law. The guards led me down a corridor lined with torches until we reached the council chamber, a long vaulted room with banners hanging like severed tongues from the ceiling. At its center stood a table carved from black oak, polished until it reflected every trembling face seated behind it. The High Council of Alphas. I'd stood before them once, years ago, when my name still carried honor. Back then, they had called me Leora of the Royal Healers Circle. Today, they called me traitor. The head counselor, a wolf named Garen, the same man who'd ordered my capture, looked up from his parchment. Leora of the Borderlands, he said coldly, you stand accused of forbidden magic, the practice of lunar healing, an art outlawed by the High Alpha's decree. Do you deny it? I didn't answer. Silence rippled through the room. Garen frowned. You will speak, or we will take your silence as guilt. I looked past him, toward the open window at the far end of the hall. Through it, the morning light spilled in, soft, golden, untouched by judgment. For a moment, I let myself breathe it in. Then I met his gaze. If healing is forbidden, I said quietly, then you've already condemned your own wounded. A few council members shifted uncomfortably, but Garen only sneered. Defiance won't save you, witch. The king himself will decide your fate. The king? I murmured. Does he still remember what fate is? The doors opened before he could respond. Every wolf in the room straightened as Alpha King Thorn entered. The air itself seemed to bend around him, heavy, charged, alive. He wore no crown today, only the simple black of mourning that had long since become his armor. His presence filled the room like thunder about to break. I had imagined this moment many times, seeing him again, the man who once swore the moon itself would bow before his word. I thought I'd hate him. But when our eyes met, I felt something else entirely. Recognition. His gaze flicked over the chains at my wrists, the bruises, the way I refused to bow. He said nothing at first, just watched. Garen cleared his throat, breaking the silence. Your Majesty, we bring before you the fugitive found practicing the old arts. She healed a dying wolf with light, defying your law. We await your judgment. Thorn's expression didn't change, but something in his jaw tightened. He turned to me. Is it true? I held his gaze. It is true that a wolf was dying. It is true that I saved him. The rest is your council's story, not mine. He studied me for a long moment. His eyes were the same, gold-rimmed in shadow, steady and unreadable. The eyes of a man who'd built a kingdom out of walls. Do you know the punishment for such a crime? He asked softly. I know what your laws demand, I said, but laws and justice are not the same thing. A murmur spread through the council. Garen slammed his palm on the table. She mocks you, sire. She dares twist the law in your own court. I turned to him, calm as the tide. I saved a life, I said. If that's treason, then your kingdom's already dying. The words hung in the air like a blade. Garen's face darkened. Enough. Kneel before your king. I didn't move. The silence that followed was so deep I could hear the torches crackle. I kept my eyes on Thorn, not out of defiance, but out of something far more dangerous. Memory. He didn't look away. He didn't order me beaten, didn't command obedience. He just stared, and for a fleeting heartbeat, I saw it, the shadow of doubt behind his stoic calm. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. Leave us. Garen blinked. Your Majesty? I said leave us. The words rolled through the hall like distant thunder. No one moved at first, uncertain if they'd heard him right. Then one by one, the council members rose, bowing their heads, retreating through the great doors until only we remained. King and prisoner. The chamber was suddenly too quiet. Thorn approached slowly, his boots echoing on the stone. He stopped a few feet away, his expression unreadable. "Why didn't you beg?" he asked. I lifted my chin. "Because mercy isn't given to those who beg for it. It's given to those who deserve it." His eyes flickered. Pain, maybe. Recognition. "You sound like her," he murmured. "Who?" He didn't answer. Instead, he turned to the window, where the sunlight touched his face, softening the edges of the man the world called monster. After a long silence, he spoke again. "You'll stay here until I decide your sentence." I said nothing. He hesitated, glancing back at me once more, not as a king looks at a criminal, but as a man looks at something he doesn't yet understand. Then he left, the heavy doors closing behind him. I stood there in the quiet, the scent of iron still thick in the air, and wondered if he'd recognized me at all. Because beneath the dirt and the chains, I still carried his mark. The same bond that once bound us beneath the same moon he now feared to face. The fortress was never meant for softness. Its walls were carved to break sound, its halls designed to echo obedience. Not footsteps as light as hers. Yet somehow, Eden slipped through them like a shadow born from the moonlight itself. She shouldn't have been able to get this far. The guards had orders to keep her in the outer wing. For the child's safety, they'd said. But they didn't know my daughter like I did. Eden never stayed behind when her heart told her where to go, and that night her heart had heard me cry out in my sleep. Later they would whisper that it was madness or magic that led her to him, to the Alpha King himself. But I've always believed it was love. Thorn's War Hall was a place of strategy and ghosts. Maps covered the long table, candlelight flickering over borders and battle plans. But he wasn't looking at any of it. He sat alone by the window, staring at the snow falling over the courtyard below. His hand rested on the hilt of his sword, though there was no threat here, not outside at least. The real battle, I think, was inside him. He had sent for the council that morning, then sent them away before they arrived. For the first time in years, the king couldn't decide whether the law he'd built was the only thing keeping his kingdom alive, or the very thing killing it. That was when he heard the footsteps. Soft, careful, too light to belong to a soldier. He turned. At first, he thought it was an illusion, a child stepping out from the shadows between the pillars, barefoot, eyes wide with both fear and wonder. Her hair fell in wild curls, the color of autumn soil, and her clothes were torn from the climb through the walls. The guards hadn't noticed her at all. "Who are you?" Thorn asked, voice low, wary. Eden hesitated, but only for a moment. "Please," she said, her voice trembling. "My mother, she didn't do anything wrong." He went still. She stepped closer, clutching the small wolf carving she carried everywhere, the one I'd made for her from driftwood when she was little. "She only heals," she whispered. "She doesn't hurt." The words struck him like a blade through armor. He had heard that voice before, not hers, but the tone, the innocence, the certainty. It was the same voice his mother had used when she'd tried to speak reason before her execution. "Mercy isn't weakness, Thorn," she had said. "It's what separates us from beasts." His chest tightened. He should have ordered the guards, should have called for her capture. But something ancient inside him refused. He looked at the child again, really looked, and the world tilted. Her aura shimmered faintly in the dim light, barely visible, but unmistakable to a wolf of his lineage. Silver threads of power ran through her veins, pulsing in rhythm with something older than blood, something that called to him like an echo across lifetimes. He had seen that light only once before, the night his brother died, the night Leora had vanished. His wolf stirred, restless beneath his skin. For years, he had buried it beneath laws and reason and the weight of his own guilt. But now, at the sound of this child's voice, it woke, not in anger, but recognition. Ours, it whispered inside him. He clenched his fists, fighting it. Who is your mother? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Eden took another step forward, her chin lifting with quiet defiance. Leora. The name broke something open inside him. His breath caught. Leora. The woman who once defied his counsel, the woman who'd stood before him in chains and spoken truth with the calm of a queen, the woman whose eyes had haunted every night since. And now, standing before him, was her reflection, smaller, braver, and impossibly pure. He swallowed hard. How did you get in here? She blinked. I followed the moonlight. It showed me the door. He almost laughed. Almost, because somehow he believed her. Eden looked up at him then, those golden eyes shining like sunlight on snow. You're the king, aren't you? I am, he said quietly. Then make them stop hurting her. The request was simple. The command of a child who didn't yet understand the weight of a kingdom's laws. Or perhaps understood it better than anyone. For a long time, Thorn didn't move. His wolf's heartbeat thundered through him, wild and unrestrained. The air shimmered faintly around them, heavy with something sacred. He took a step closer. The scent of her hit him, wildflowers, rain, and something achingly familiar. Alaris blood. The realization hit him like lightning. His hand trembled. Who is your father? He asked, though part of him already dreaded the truth. Eden tilted her head, confused. Mama never told me. Her innocence struck deeper than any confession could. He stepped back, the world spinning. His wolf surged again, snarling beneath his control, desperate to reach her, to protect her. But Thorn forced it down, jaw tight, breath unsteady. The torches flickered, the maps on the table rustled, though no wind passed. Go back to your room, he said finally, voice hoarse, before someone sees you here. Eden didn't move. Will you help her? He closed his eyes. I don't know. The silence stretched. Then, softly, she whispered the words that would undo him completely. Please, my king. The title trembled from her lips, innocent and pleading, and his control broke. His wolf answered, not with words, but with a low, guttural growl that shook the air itself. The gold in his eyes blazed, and the power of his bloodline, the ancient line of the first alphas, surged through the hall. Eden gasped, but she didn't step back. She simply looked up at him, unafraid. And for the first time in 7 years, Thorn Draven realized what he had done. He had condemned his own blood. He sank to one knee before her, his breath trembling, his voice rough and human again. You shouldn't be here, he whispered, but you've reminded me what I've forgotten. What's that? She asked. He looked at her, the child born of light and defiance, and answered, how to listen. And somewhere deep within the fortress, the moon rose higher, silent witness to a king learning, at last, that the voice of mercy could sound like the cry of a child. The relic waited in silence, a stone disk carved with the mark of the moon, half buried beneath centuries of dust. It had been locked away since before my reign, in the vaults beneath the citadel. My father called it the curse of Alaris. I had believed him. I had believed all of them, the council, the priests, the keepers of the laws who claimed the old blood was dangerous. Until now. Until her. Leora. She stood before me, chained once more, the silver cuffs glinting faintly in the torchlight. Her wrists were raw, but her gaze, God's, her gaze, was steady. Calm, even. That calm was what frightened me most. It wasn't surrender. It was knowing. The relic pulsed faintly on the table between us. The council had ordered it brought here, demanding proof of corruption. But I'd dismissed them all. Tonight, there would be no witnesses. No voices, but ours. You know what this is, I said quietly. Her eyes flicked toward it. The memory stone, she whispered, carved in the age of first light. It doesn't lie. No, I said. It doesn't. I hadn't meant to sound cruel, but truth was a weapon in my family, and I had learned to wield it before I learned mercy. I reached for the relic. It was cold, impossibly cold. Runes ignited beneath my touch, bleeding silver light that crawled up my arms and filled the room. I should have let go, but I didn't. Something in the stone reached back. The world fell away. I saw her first, younger, unscarred, her laughter like the chime of wind through glass. She stood in a field of moon lilies, her hands glowing faintly as she healed a wounded wolf, and beside her was my brother, Alaric, the heir I once envied, the brother I loved and failed. He was watching her the way I used to watch the moon, reverent, hungry, afraid to touch what he didn't deserve. I saw them standing together in the temple courtyard, the priests anointing her forehead with silver. Chosen Luna of the air. The kingdom had rejoiced, the court had whispered. Then came the night of fire. My father's soldiers, the smell of burning, screams. Alaric fell first. Not in battle, in betrayal. A blade through the back by his own guard, the same guard who swore loyalty to my father's throne. And Leora, God's Leora, she ran through the flames, clutching something in her arms, not a weapon, a child. The vision blurred, shifted, burned brighter. I saw her standing before the temple as the roof collapsed, her body glowing with light that defied every law of nature. The last of the Alaris blood, the last of the moon's blessing. When the flames died, she was the only one who still breathed. I ripped my hand from the relic, gasping. The stone fell silent, its light fading to nothing. But the images remained, seared into my mind like scars. She hadn't been the traitor, she'd been the sacrifice. I turned toward her slowly. My father ordered that attack, I said, my voice raw. Didn't he? Leora didn't answer. She didn't need to. You were meant to be Luna, I went on, the words trembling out of me. To my brother. Her silence was unbearable. You loved him. Her lips parted, but what came out wasn't a confession. It was something softer, heavier. I loved what he wanted to be, she said, a king who could end the bloodshed. But he never got the chance. The torches flickered. I sank into the nearest chair, pressing a hand over my eyes. All these years, I whispered, I thought my brother died defending the realm. I thought your people turned on us. You were only told the story that kept you on the throne, she said. The truth hit like a blade. And the child? I asked. The one you carried from the fire? For the first time, her composure cracked, just slightly. She was all I had left. I looked up sharply. Eden. Her breath hitched, barely a sound, but enough. My chest tightened. She's his, I said slowly. Alaric's blood. Leora's eyes shone in the half-light. She's more than his. The blood of the moon's line runs through her, the first and last true heir to both thrones, yours and mine. I stared at her, unable to speak. The room felt smaller, the air thinner. I had spent my life believing I was the last rightful ruler of the crown. But in that moment, standing before the woman my kingdom called traitor, I realized the truth. I was nothing more than a usurper to a legacy built on ashes and lies. Leora lifted her chin, meeting my gaze. She doesn't know, she said, and she must never. If the council learns what she is, they'll destroy her like they destroyed us. My pulse thundered in my ears. The wolf inside me stirred again, not with rage this time, with instinct, protection, claiming. They won't touch her, I said. Leora studied me for a long, long time. You can't save her, Thorn. The kingdom would tear itself apart. Then let it. The words left my mouth before I could stop them. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked startled, and for the briefest heartbeat, I saw something in her eyes that wasn't defiance or fear. It was recognition. The light from the relic flared one last time, faint and fleeting, casting the shadow of a wolf and a woman across the stone floor. And in that shadow, I finally saw it, the truth beneath the chains. She wasn't my prisoner, she was my penance. It began with silence, not the kind that follows peace, but the kind that comes before ruin. The council had gathered in the lower chamber beneath the citadel. I could hear them even before I entered. The murmur of wolves disguised as men, the scrape of armor, the metallic scent of deceit. They spoke in circles, the way courtiers always do when they've already chosen their sin and are only debating how to name it. Two traitors, one voice hissed, the woman and the child. The bloodline cannot remain, another growled. If the people learn she carries royal blood, they'll turn on the throne. On him. The air thickened at that. I stood in the doorway, unseen for a moment, watching them twist fear into policy. My father's counsel, my counsel now. Your Majesty, Garen said when he finally noticed me, his tone slick with practiced reverence. We've convened to discuss the matter of the prisoner and her offspring. Offspring. As if Eden were not a child, as if she did not laugh, or cry, or dream, as if she were something less than theirs, something to be erased. Garen gestured to the table. Our conclusion is unanimous. They must be executed before dawn, quietly. The kingdom cannot survive the stain of another Alaris heir. I said nothing. The chamber waited. He took my silence as permission. The girl's presence here already spreads rumor. Some of the guards whisper that the moon favors her. We cannot allow that kind of talk to take root. The people obey the law, sire, not myths. Still, I did not speak. Because if I opened my mouth now, the wolf inside me would not speak in words. It would tear and howl and destroy. Garen went on. We have prepared the formal decree. All it requires is your seal. He slid the parchment toward me. The wax stamp lay beside it. The sigil of my line. My father's seal. The one I had used 1,000 times before without hesitation. But this time my hand wouldn't move. I could still feel the warmth of Eden's small hand against mine the night before, when I had escorted her back to her quarters. The way she had looked up at me, not as a king, but as something far simpler, someone who could choose. She doesn't hurt, she had said. She only heals. Now the words echoed through me as if the walls themselves remembered. Garen cleared his throat. Your Majesty? I looked up. And if I refuse? The room shifted. Wolves stiffened. The air itself seemed to recoil. You would defy the council? Garen asked, incredulous. You would place your mercy above the law? My law, I said quietly. His nostrils flared. No law is above the throne, sire. Not even yours. And mercy is not what built your crown. It's what burned your brothers. A murmur of agreement rippled through the generals. I stared at the parchment again, the ink glistening like blood. Execution before dawn. No trial, no defense. Just silence. The same silence my father used to call justice. I rose slowly. The chair scraped against the stone. Leave me, I said. Garen hesitated. Your Majesty, the council. Leave me. Something in my voice made him bow his head and obey. One by one, they filed out, their steps echoing down the corridor until the chamber was empty, except for me, and the silence. I thought of my brother, of Leora, of the fire that had taken everything we once believed sacred. And now, history demanded I finish what they had started. I pressed my hands to the table, head bowed. My pulse thundered against the quiet. Then, faint at first, I heard it. A sound carried through the stone, soft and tremulous. A child's cry. It grew clearer, closer. The courtyard. Please, Eden's voice broke through the cold. Please, don't take my mother away. The words sliced through me like a blade through bone. My wolf rose before I could stop it, not from anger, but from recognition. The sound of her cry reached something ancient in me, something buried beneath the crown and the chains of duty. The beast inside me, starved for years, tore through the cage I had built. The candles flickered, the room shook, my vision blurred gold, every instinct screamed to protect, to tear down every wall that stood between her and safety. But the king, the part of me that had learned to bury instinct beneath law, didn't move, couldn't. I sank to my knees, trembling with the effort of holding myself back. The beast clawed at my chest, howling to be free. Outside, the sound of soldiers' boots echoed through the courtyard, the march of those who obeyed orders, not hearts. Her cry came again, smaller this time. Please, my king. I felt something break. I rose, slow and unsteady, the wolf's growl still caught in my throat. My reflection in the dark glass of the window was no longer that of a ruler. The crown, the command, the discipline, all of it had fallen away. There was only a man left, a man who had spent his life building walls so high even his own soul couldn't climb out. And yet now, because of a child's cry, the walls were trembling. I reached for the sword at my side, not as a weapon, but as a vow. The moon outside slipped behind a cloud. The light dimmed, the fortress breathing like a beast about to wake. For the first time in years, I let the wolf rise fully. Not the king. The wolf, and as the guards moved toward the prison gates, the silence shattered. Not with words, but with a roar that shook the heavens. The Alpha had answered. The courtyard was still when I stepped into it, the kind of stillness that precedes a storm. The moon hung low, pale and watchful, silvering the snow that blanketed the ground. Torches burned along the walls, their flames sharp and hungry. A ring of soldiers surrounded the platform in the center, the same platform where traitors were executed, where my father had burned mercy out of the kingdom and called it order. And on that platform stood Leora. Her wrists were bound, her hair wild in the wind, her eyes fixed not on me, but on the crowd that gathered like vultures around the scaffold. I could feel the tremor of fear in the air, but it wasn't hers. It belonged to them, to the wolves, who didn't yet understand that their world was about to break. Beside her, clutched in the arms of a trembling guard, was Eden. Her small face was streaked with tears, her lips blue from the cold. But when she saw me, she didn't hide. She straightened, my brother's fire and her mother's courage burning through her tiny frame, and cried out, "Please, don't take my mother away." The sound hit me harder than any blade could. The soldiers froze, even the wind seemed to stop, and then I saw it, the flicker of recognition in Leora's eyes, the faintest shake of her head. She was warning me, not for herself, but for me, because she already knew what I was about to do. I walked forward, slow, deliberate, each step echoing through the courtyard. The wolves parted instinctively, the way they always had, not from respect this time, but confusion. The council watched from the steps of the temple, Garen at their head, his mouth already curling into a sneer. "Your Majesty," he began, his voice sharp, "you shouldn't be here." The sentence is mine to give, I said. He faltered. I climbed the steps to the platform. The soldiers stiffened, but did not stop me. I could feel their eyes on me, their uncertainty thick as fog. When I reached Eden, the guard holding her bowed quickly, relieved to surrender her to me. She weighed almost nothing in my arms, and yet the moment I lifted her, the weight of my crown became unbearable. Her small hand clutched my cloak. "Please," she whispered again, voice trembling. "She only heals." I looked at her, at the raw innocence that somehow survived in this world I had made cruel, and something inside me shattered for the final time. I turned to the soldiers. "Release her," I said quietly. No one moved. Garen's voice cut through the stillness. "Your Majesty, you cannot. This is treason against your own decree." Then perhaps the decree was wrong. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The soldiers shifted, uncertain. Garen stepped forward, his eyes wide. "If you do this," he hissed, "you break the very law your throne is built on." I looked at him, at the man who had once been my father's most loyal hound, and felt nothing but disgust. Then maybe the throne deserves to break. He stared at me, speechless. I turned back to the soldiers guarding Leora. I said, "Release her." Still they hesitated. Loyalty and fear fought behind their eyes. They were bound not to me, but to the idea of me, the unyielding Alpha King who had never bent, never doubted, never knelt. That version of me was already dead. When they did not move, I took a step forward, still holding the child, and did the unthinkable. I sank to my knees. The sound of my armor against the stone was sharp, final, like the crack of thunder before a storm breaks. Gasps filled the courtyard. The council recoiled as if the ground itself had betrayed them. The Alpha King was kneeling, not in defeat, not in penance, but in choice. I set Eden gently on the ground beside me and met the eyes of every wolf gathered there. "You call yourselves a pack," I said, my voice carrying through the cold, "but you've forgotten what a pack is. It's not built on fear. It's built on bond, on blood, on trust." The wind howled, scattering snow through the torches. "If mercy is rebellion," I said, my voice steady now, "then let the crown bear its own punishment." Leora's chains fell first, the guards trembling as they unlocked them, unsure whether they were obeying or defying me. The silver hit the ground with a dull clang. She stood free, her wrists bleeding but her back straight, her gaze locked on mine. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked at me not with accusation, but something far more dangerous: belief. The crowd held its breath. Wolves lowered their heads, some out of shame, others out of something deeper, the instinctive recognition of what could not be undone. Because in the law of the pack, submission is power when chosen, and no alpha bows without reason. When I rose, the silence was complete. Even Garen couldn't speak. I took Leora's hand, her pulse steady beneath my fingers, and drew her close enough for only her to hear. "It ends tonight," I said. "No more chains. No more silence." She looked up at me, her voice trembling. "And what will you be after this?" I smiled, not as a king, but as a wolf finally unmasked. "Whatever the moon allows me to be." Behind us, the wolves lowered themselves one by one, heads bowed, their howls swallowed by the night. Not a sound of rebellion, but reverence. For the first time in centuries, an Alpha King had bowed, and the pack at last remembered how to listen. The moon hung red and slow, a bruised coin over the courtyard. Torches flared, breath turned to mist, and the ancestral voices threaded the air, asking for balance the old way, blood for blood. I felt it first as a pressure in my chest. The memory stone at the temple's axis hummed beneath the plaza, answering the summons. Wolves and men turned their faces skyward. Garen's confidence thinned like paper. Thorn stood near me, cloak heavy with frost. He looked older, not merely in years, but in the way sorrow had carved him. He stepped forward and said quietly, "Take my life." The council stiffened. The ancestral chorus swelled. Balance must be paid. My instinct screamed against it. I had watched sacrifice burn villages. I had learned that more blood stitches nothing but a fresh wound. If he died for me, the sentence would repeat itself in another house. Another child. He drew a dagger without hesitation. A thin line opened across his palm. When he offered his blood to me, the gravity of the moment pressed like winter. I touched his hand, feeling the heat and the drum of his pulse through skin and bone. "No," I told him softly. "If you die for me, the curse remains. You would gild the ledger with your name." The moon caught the word and held it. He searched my face, then bowed his head. "Then tell me what ends it," he asked. I placed my hand over his heart. The runes in the stone beneath our feet brightened. The memory stone sang, curious and expectant. I knew what the ancestors craved: death, ritual, a clear ledger. I also knew what healing demanded: a different binding. "Live for her," I said. "Live for Eden. Let your blood bind you to protection, not revenge." The courtyard murmured. Soldiers shifted uneasily. Garen's jaw worked. He had expected an execution. Instead, he watched a bargain being struck. Thorn closed his fingers around mine. He produced a phial, uncorked it, and with steady hands let a bead of blood form. I drew up a small blunt blade and let a drop of my own blood fall to meet his on the stone. 2 streams braided across cold runes, hot and honest. He spoke then, voice low and iron wrought. "By my name, by the wrongs of my line, I bind my house to guard and not to prey upon the moonborn. We will defend what remains rather than punish what was. I live for the child." The memory stone drank. Light threaded through the runes and circled the plaza like a slow tide. The ancestral songs softened, their hunger folded into listening. They had not received the spilling they demanded, but they had been offered a living vow, a binding that did not breed more death. Eden stepped forward, small and unshaken, and placed her hand atop ours. She looked at him without fear. In that child's blunt faith, Thorn's shoulders shifted. The man who had governed by horror now learned to hold by promise. The red in the moon thinned toward silver, and the air changed. The council could murmur until dawn, but the seal had been set by 2 hands joined in blood and word, not by blade. It was a different justice, one that chose life over ledger, protection over reprisal. I stood with Thorn in that circle of light. His hand in mine was no longer the hand of a judge. It was the hand of someone who had chosen to be more than law. The trial had demanded balance. We answered with a vow. The moon watched, and for the first time in many nights, did not look away. Garen looked as though the world had rearranged. His practiced certainty faltered. The soldiers shifted, torn between duty and something older in their bones. A breath moved through the crowd, considered and wary, then easing like thawed ice. I felt fatigue of the kind that follows a long vigil. Thorn's shoulders softened. Where he had held a wall, he now bore a promise. We did not erase the past, nor pretend wounds had vanished. We laid down a new law, blood used to bind, not break. The moon watched, a witness to a vow, and the night listened. The dawn came quietly, too quietly for a world that had just broken its chains. I stood on the temple steps as the first light bled over the valley, gold seeping into the snow. The fires of the night still burned in scattered pyres where the council's decrees had been thrown, page after page curling into ash. Words that had once ruled lives were now no more than smoke in the cold morning air. For the first time in generations, the kingdom had no law but the one written by the moon itself. The parchment I held trembled slightly in my hand, not from fear, but from something deeper, something I couldn't name. I'd spent half my life wielding decrees like weapons, believing structure could tame the wildness in us, but power built on fear doesn't last. It only waits for the right voice to rise against it. And last night, that voice had been a child's. Eden stood now at the base of the temple, her small hands wrapped around her mother's. The crowd surrounded them, wolves, mortals, omegas, alphas, each wearing the same expression: disbelief. They had come to witness an ending. Instead, they were about to see a beginning. I stepped forward and unrolled the parchment. The final decree, the last relic of the council's rule, lay before me. The script was old, the ink black as sin. It named hierarchy as sacred law, alphas as rulers, omegas as property, seers as tools. It was the spine of a kingdom built on chains. The wind rose, catching the edge of the paper like a warning. I spoke loud enough for every wolf in the courtyard to hear. By the moon's light and the blood of all who've fallen in her name, I dissolve the old law. From this sunrise forward, there will be no alpha, no omega, no division of worth. Every soul stands equal beneath her gaze. A murmur rippled through the pack. Some gasped. Others bowed their heads as if struck. Garen, who stood among the remnants of the council, took a step forward, his face pale. "You can't do this," he rasped. "Without order, there will be chaos." I looked at him. "You mistake order for control. Chaos isn't born from equality, it's born from silence." Then I held the parchment to the nearest torch. The flames took it greedily, curling the words into smoke. When the last ember died, I dropped the ashes onto the snow. "The law," I said quietly, "is ash. Let the moon judge what remains." A long silence followed. The wolves didn't cheer, they didn't kneel, they only watched, uncertain whether to rejoice or mourn. Even freedom can frighten those who've never had it. Leora came to stand beside me. Her eyes, usually calm and distant, now shimmered with something unguarded, hope, maybe, or grief too deep to name. She looked out at the crowd, and then up at the fading moon, still red at its edges. "You've undone centuries," she said softly. "No," I answered. "I've only begun to repay them." Eden tugged at her mother's sleeve and pointed toward the sky. The sun had climbed higher now, cutting through the mist, setting fire to the silver of the temple's spires. She stepped forward, her voice barely more than a whisper, but it carried through the silence like a prayer. He listened. The words struck me harder than any battle cry. Because they weren't meant for the wolves or the court, they were meant for me, for the man who had once thought power meant obedience, for the king who had ruled through silence because he feared the sound of his own heart. Now, as the wolves shifted and the crowd began to move, I felt that heartbeat differently, slower, surer, not the rhythm of command, but of belonging. Leora turned to me, the faintest smile touching her lips. "They don't know what comes next," she said. "Neither do I admitted. "But maybe that's the point." Below us, wolves began to unfasten the collars that marked their rank. Omegas stood shoulder to shoulder with their alphas, eyes reflecting the dawn. No one spoke, but in that silence, something new was taking root. A quiet understanding that the moon no longer chose kings. It chose witnesses. The world would not heal overnight. The scars of law do not fade easily. But somewhere in that courtyard, where ashes met morning light, I saw a glimpse of the realm we could become. One not bound by bloodlines or power, but by the fragile, defiant act of listening. The pack trembled, caught between fear and faith, and as I looked down at the child who had taught me both, I whispered to her, "The moon hears you now." She smiled, a small, knowing smile that seemed older than her years. Then she looked up at the crimson-tinged dawn and said again, more softly this time, "He listened." And for the first time since I took the crown, I believed her. The forest was quiet that night. Not the hollow silence of fear, but the kind that settles when the world finally exhales, when the old songs have ended, and something new begins in the hush between heartbeats. I walked alone beneath the moon's light, though I no longer feared what it might reveal. The kingdom had changed. The law that once bound wolves in chains of rank and blood had burned away with the sunrise, and in its ashes the forest seemed to breathe again. It was strange. this peace. For years I had ruled through noise, the clash of steel, the bark of orders, the endless rhythm of conquest. But now, the only sound was the wind through the silver leaves. The forest hummed with a language older than any decree, one that spoke not of obedience, but of belonging. The path curved toward the glade, where the silver tree grew. It had been sacred once, long before kings, before crowns, before the word alpha ever meant power. Its bark shimmered like moonlight caught in water, and its roots drank from a spring that never froze. That was where I found them. Leora sat beneath its branches, her cloak spread around her like spilled starlight. Eden was asleep in her lap, her small fingers curled against her mother's hand. The sight stopped me. I had seen her face in firelight, in chains, in defiance. But never like this, unguarded, at peace. The silver glow touched her hair, turning it the color of frost, and her breathing matched the rhythm of the leaves above her. When she looked up, she didn't rise, she didn't bow, she didn't need to. "You shouldn't be out here," she said softly. "Perhaps not," I answered. But I couldn't sleep. The silence is different now. She smiled faintly. "It's the sound of freedom. Takes getting used to." I walked closer, the earth soft beneath my boots. The wolves that had once guarded me with tooth and blade now lingered at the edges of the glade, silent and still. They didn't follow. They watched. They, too, were learning a new kind of silence. I knelt beside her, slow and deliberate. Not as a king this time, not even as an alpha, just as a man who had finally understood what it meant to listen. Eden stirred, blinking sleep from her eyes. Her gaze met mine, and for a moment, the weight of every sin I had ever committed pressed down like winter. She looked so much like my brother. The same golden eyes, the same unflinching innocence. "Your Majesty?" she whispered, voice small and uncertain. I shook my head. "Just Thorn." She sat up slightly, rubbing her eyes. "You came back." "I did." Her brow furrowed, as if testing whether she could believe me. "You won't take her away again, will you?" The question pierced me. It wasn't accusation. It was trust, asking for proof. I reached out, hesitated for the briefest moment, then brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "Never," I said quietly, "because her song belongs here, and I was only ever meant to listen." The words felt heavier than any vow I had sworn before. Leora's eyes softened, though tears shimmered there. She placed a hand over Eden's shoulder, then over mine, the three of us bound not by blood, but by what had survived it. "The pack will follow you now," she said. I shook my head. "No, they'll follow her." The wind stirred again, carrying the faint, distant sound of howls, not the sharp call of dominance, but something gentler, mournful, grateful. Wolves all across the valley were lifting their voices, not in rage, but in reverence. The pack that once roared for conquest now bowed to quiet, not to power, not to me, but to the voice of a little girl who had refused to stop asking for mercy. I looked up at the moon, still hanging low above the trees. It no longer looked like judgment, only light. The same light that had once condemned me now touched my shoulders with something close to forgiveness. Eden yawned, curling closer to her mother. "Does this mean the bad dreams are gone?" Leora smiled. "It means the moon remembers us again." The child nodded sleepily, already half dreaming. I stayed there a while longer, listening, not to the forest, not even to the wolves, but to the sound of their breathing, to the proof that peace could exist, fragile and real, after so much ruin. When I finally rose, the silver tree shimmered as if alive, its branches whispering through the night. The wolves beyond the clearing lowered their heads as I passed, not out of fear, but respect. The kingdom I had once ruled through command would now live by something else entirely. the silence of balance. And as I left the glade, I realized that the moon itself seemed to hum, low, steady, unbroken, not calling for power, not demanding blood, just listening. For the first time in my life, so was I.